Okay, I'm Rubin Zemon, PhD on anthropology. My PhD thesis was Balkan Egyptian aspects of historic and ethnographic aspects, defended in Bulgaria, in Sofia, by the Ethnographic Institute of the Bulgarian Academy of Science. I'm also from the Balkan Egyptian community, and I was also one of the founders of the Union of Balkan Egyptian. Before that, it was some national, let's say, NGOs, non-government organizations, and some political parties. But in 1996, we created the International Organization Union. Unfortunately, today is not functioning well, but we'll try again to re-establish one kind of union or association, let's say, or I don't know. We had one meeting a few months ago in Albania, and the need for making of one organization that will unite all the, let's see, organizations or political parties of Balkan Egyptians in the Balkan states, it's very necessary.
Well, can you briefly explain? I know it's a long story, but the origins of the Balkan Egyptians. I've heard different origin stories for them.
Okay, scientifically, it was very hard to locate the time and place from where colonies from the Egypt immigrated in the Balkans. But of course, we have a lot of archaeological findings in the Balkans that are giving to us indications that the that the community from Egypt here existed from the very ancient time. For example, Herodotus, he wrote about Pharaoh Sesostrit, who actually, there are two variations. Who was the Pharaoh Sesostrit? One is from the third Egyptian dynasty. He was somewhere 1,800 years BC. But according to some scholars, and I am one of those scholars, we are saying that actually Herodotus is writing for Ramses II, who actually at that time was the time of the transformation from the Bronze to Iron Age, and Egypt is the most powerful power in East Mediterranean at that time. They need to import iron and gold in Egypt, because in Egypt you can't find natural iron, some meteoric iron maybe, but not natural. And for that reason, it was a huge need for the for the Egypt state to import iron in Egypt. And of course, the resources for iron was today Turkey, Anatolia, Balkan Peninsula, Apennine and Pyrenees Peninsula. So for that reason, actually Herodotus wrote about this Pharaoh Sesostrit, who actually colonized. He's talking about colonization after the army of the Pharaoh Sesostrit came here. And this is, for example, related with the mythological time, as we say in our science. And that's it, actually one of the myths that are giving indications of the migrations of the people from Egypt and the Levant coast. It's actually the myth of the Cadmus and his sister Harmony. So he went from the Tiba today, or from Turkey actually, to Creta, and from Creta to Mykenæ, and in Theba, in Beoti, he also, the cult of Cadmus we have there, in Theba of Beoti, or today it's Tiva in Greece. And of course he continued his research for his sister until the Adriatic Sea, today it's Tivat in Montenegro, one of indication that actually Tiba, related with the cowboys, the path, the road how Kadmo actually came. Also in Montenegro we have the city of Ulcid, which the ancient name was Kolhidea, and the Kolkhis, also in Black Sea, in Caucasian, today in Georgia. We have Kolhida, but Herodotus also wrote that the Kolkhis are pure Egyptian. But however, where we have, for example, from that time, 12th century or 13th century BC, the movement related with the exploitation of the iron or exploitation of the gold, we have indication of the colonization of the Egyptian community. There are also many details that we can go deeply, or we can read in my books about other indications for that. But also in ancient time here in the Balkans, we have a great number of temples of Isis. And when you have a temples, it's necessary to be community, because some of the scholars are saying it's only import from the soldiers who came with Alexander or the Roman and so on. But maybe it's import if you have some ornaments from jewelry, statues and so on. But if you have a temple, you must have community, of course. It's not possible just. And for that reason, we have this so-called archaeological findings. We have also some historical sources. Of course, the construction of the history is legal also. Event of any community, of any nation, to create his or her or its history. So my PhD was actually that to make the construction of all this historical, ethnographical, and anthropological data and information. Also, we have parallelly, not parallelly, but independently, it was with the other aim, of course. It was the research of Martin Bernal from the Cornell University, with his team of more than 200 scholars, that he also give us a lot of evidences and proof about the colonization of the people from the Egypt and from the Middle East, Levant coast to the Balkans in his very famous tetralogy study, Black Athena.
You've mentioned a few things I wanted to ask about, especially Martin Bernal, but I think going in order, you did mention that Herodotus talks about the pure Egyptians on the coast of Georgia. And I was wondering, you said that you wrote this in 1999. You mentioned a Croatian Egyptologist who believed that Egyptians who settled around the Croatian islands didn't assimilate.
It's Peter Selim, Peter Selim from Split, very famous Croatia, very famous Egyptologist. He wrote that during the Roman Empire, actually his dissertation is named Egyptian cults in a Roman Illyricus, and he wrote that, for example, in Salona or Solina, near to Split also today, or in other islands, are indicated existing of the Egyptian small communities that were taken with their traditional crafts. So, of course, it's also another one, a scholar from Makarska, Marunasic. He make one study about the etymology of the many toponyms in Adriatic Sea, and he's saying that there are a lot of Egyptian origin. For example, Horvatska is from Hor. It's his opinion, it's not mine. But also a lot of other, for example, toponyms. And the science is developing, and unfortunately we are still, how to say, slaves of the theory from the 18th and 19th century, when was the theory of the progress and colonization, actually, in Europe theory, and when was history was created according to the philosophers of the 18th or 19th century, where actually the Eurocentrism was one kind of main pillar of the construction of the history. But today, also, especially post-colonial, let's say, scholars and historians and philosophers are much more liberal, and are thinking much more. They're giving to us a lot of other evidence and proofs that actually is not only the Eurocentric position of the history. So, also in the United States there are a lot of Afro-American scholars who are also speaking about the Stilett legacy and so on. And they are so-called Afrocentrists, actually, scholars who are saying that actually the cut of civilization, it was Africa. I am not 100% agree with that, but they are giving to us a lot of evidence that that are destroying the Eurocentric or the primacy of the white man in a history of the civilization.
Well, Martin Bernal called that the Aryan model, and he said that the classic idea of Hellenistic Romanticism didn't even come about until the 18th century.
Yeah.
So can you describe a little bit about what the Aryan model is and what you would suggest? I think you said in the 90s it was more of an influx from both the Semitic regions and from Africa, all intersecting in Greece, right?
Not only Greece, everywhere, in Apenninian also, in Toscana, in Spain also. But there we still don't have enough scholars and finances to make a deeper research on this area. In Turkey, in Anatolia and so on. And Georgia, as well, I mentioned it, in Caucasian region.
Would that Abkhazia?
Caucasian, yeah.
Oh, Caucasia. Okay.
Georgia, Azerbaijan.
Okay. Well, I know Abkhazia is a separatist state, but Caucasia, the Caucasus?
Caucasia, the mountain.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
The mountain of Caucasia.
My American geography.
Yeah, no problem. So actually, yeah, Martin Bernal is giving a very brave one theory about the Aryan model of the history. He is saying that before the 17th, 18th, 19th century, it was existing among the people, so-called ancient model about the classical philosophy or history and so on, but with the theory of colonialism that appeared in the 18th century or 19th century, it was established a so-called Aryan model that was thrown out the ancient model, and he is proposing now a new revised actually ancient model of the history. So as I mentioned, the ancient model is saying that it was normally for the people, if we read a lot of works, poems, philosophy from the period before 17th century in Europe, we will see it was very normal and ordinary to discuss about Egyptians and Jewish or Phoenicians existing in Europe or in the Balkan. But after establishment of this Aryan model, it was thrown out actually and was from the collective memory, and the books were actually wrote that only the European people are the head of civilization, and they from the white people is actually everything existing in the world with the history.
What do you think caused that change? To justify colonialism?
That's right, yeah. It was justifying the colonialism and national romanticism, and of course the Nazism. When we see who were the authors or the creators of the Aryan model, actually we will see that later that the Nazis take sources from those.
You grew up in the Egyptian community, and I was reading a newspaper article published in America in 1995. He mentions cultural anthropologist Miradrag Ristic.
Kajaristic, yeah.
And he claims that the Balkan Egyptians believe certain mythology that corresponds with Egyptian mythology. The human shadow causes illness and things like that. Do you know any mythology that sort of is different from Romani or Ashkali mythology that corresponds with Egyptian?
Okay, for me, Ashkali and Egyptian is they have the how to say they are one community with two identities. The difference is between Egyptian and Ashkali from one side and Roma from other side, because the Roma are coming from India, from Punjab actually, and their origin is and their mythology is related with India. Their language is related with in India and so on, actually with Punjab and so on. And of course, they have totally different believings among the people and totally different culture. So you go in the field, you will see that they are different behaviors between the Roma and Egyptian, of course. But what was the problem? The problem is that when the Roma came in Europe, especially in the Balkan in the 14th century, they were actually evicted from the people here. They were not accepted, and they were were pushed to declare as Egyptians, because the Egyptians was previously here integrated in the societies in the Balkans or in Europe, and because of the similarity of the color of the skin, actually the white people can make a difference between different dark-skinned people. It's normal. Also, I think the African can make difference between the Dutch and Germans, or Belgians, or we can make a difference if you're not talking with people who is Chinese, who is Mongolian, who is Japanese. Okay, so racial stereotypes are, how to say, very, very powerful indicators to identify the people. And for that reason, the Romas in 14th century used this, how to say, identification as Egyptian, just to be better integrated in the societies, or for better prestige, as one of the very famous Roma scholars, Marcel Curtiadi, wrote that actually the question is why the Roma, who are origin from India, they declare themselves Egyptian. And he's saying because of the better prestige in the society. But still, we have a huge racial stereotypizing and racial discrimination, and in a lot of cases in the Balkan we have the Roma and Egyptians to be the same victims of the racial discrimination in Kosovo, in Albania, everywhere in the Balkans, and I believe also in other Mediterranean states. Ashkali for me is one ethnographic group that are living in the valley of Kosovo, so that are the cities of Ferizaj, Gnjilan, Pristina, Fuš Kosovo, Kosovo Pole. It's one ethnographic group that are related with one ethnographic group of Balkan Egyptians. We have very different Balkan Egyptians groups.
You mentioned a couple things about the 13th and 14th century, and that reminds me, a couple centuries before that, you wrote that Archbishop Theophylact wrote about areas governed by a pharaoh, and he said that he traveled through Egypt to go from Ohrid to Constantinople. Can you tell me a little about that?
Yes, from the letters of the Theophylact, we say Theophylact. He was the Archbishop of the Ohrid Church in 12th century. He wrote to his friend, I think the Archbishop of Kerkira, some letters where he mentioned it that in Ohrid it was one guy who is making the most of the problem in his, not ruling, but servicing. And he was known as with the name Pharaoh. So you see, it's a time before the Roma came, and it's the time before the Aryan model.
So the Roma were 13th, 14th century.
14 later, 200 years later, and before the Aryan model. So among the people was very well known the existing of the people from Egypt, and also about this Haridba road, he said that I have to travel from Ohrid to Constantinopolis, but I must traveling through sea or through the land, but it's like to traveling through Egypt and Haridba. So if he said the traveling through Egypt, probably he's thinking about even maybe he was a religious man, church person. Maybe Egypt is association of something else. Maybe according to the legend of Moses and so on, is maybe he has some other associations. But he wrote this, and he mentioned that the road from Ohrid to Constantinople for him is like to go through Egypt. So,
and that would be the Via Egnatia, right?
Yes.
And the Roma.
Actually, the Via Egnatia, that was the road Via Egnatia. From Rome to Constantinople, it was the road Ohrid and Bitola and Thessaloniki.
And it's so interesting to me that he referred to it as Egypt centuries before the Roma got there.
Yes, Roma from India. Yeah.
So you mentioned Herodotus, and he said he actually observed Egyptians living in Greece in his homeland. What did he say about them? Did he describe their characteristics?
No, but he's not writing nothing about the Egyptian in Hellada or Hellas, but he mentioned it that according to some myths and mythologies of Persei and the Lacedaemonians, he said that the Spartanians, Lacedaemonians, according to the believing of the people, they had in that time they had Egyptian origin. And you know, when going to Mykenna, you were in Mykenna in Peloponnese. It was where actually Schliemann said that he found the most Agamemnon. You are entering in a fortress with the name Lion Gate. There are two lions.
Oh, I've seen the photos.
The pedestal, and actually, such application you can find in Egypt everywhere. It's a symbol of Aker. Aker is the guardians who is protecting not to be easy transferring from this to the underground world. Actually, the world of the dead people. So Aker is the guardian who is who is keeping not people or the dead people, or live people to go from this to other world, according to their believing. So, you know, such let's say Lions Gates we have also in Anatolia. Few actually in the places where Ramses II fight with the Hittites at that time, and you know later. I think 1355 they signed the peace of Kadesh. Is the first actually peace in the world, and today it's that stone is keeping in the United Nations building in New York.
And you said Ramses II was described by Herodotus as
Sesostrid, yeah. But these Lion Gates, we also have some examples similar, not the same in Anatolia, where the Hittites were.
You wrote in 1999 that the Cadmus legend should be contextualized with the tombs in the Trebeniste metropolis. What's interesting to me is that it seems like a lot of these archaeological sites are around Ohrid. Can you tell me a little bit more about why the necropolis sort of corresponds to Egyptian sites?
Because of the ceremony of boring the kings or the groves, as Pascal Kuzman is saying, Trebeniște groves, and the masks. So the ceremony of putting the mask of the king or who was there, it's actually very similar what we have in Egypt with Tutankhamun, what we have in Mykenae with Agamemnon, and what we have in Trebeniște. That was the line, actually. And again, we can, if we see the legend of Cadmus, there are indications of the colonizations of the people. And of course, boring with the masks, golden mask is it's very known from that kind of people from Egypt. And what is also very important in that mask in Trebeniște is one application of the bee. You know, bee, you said? Insect?
Oh yeah, bees.
Bees. And actually the existing of the bees in Egypt mythologies was also very important. And the honey, you know, mummification of the people was made by the honey.
I've heard about that actually.
Yeah.
You wrote Pascal Kuzman excavated the cemeteries of the Egyptians on Mount Stugovo in 1990.
It was not Pascal Kuzman, it's Vlado Malenko, yeah, another archaeologist, in Stogovo. Yeah. It's a mountain between Ohrid and Kičevo. Yeah.
I'm wondering,
and the toponymy is they called Gypsies' graves, Egypt's grobišta.
so it had always been known as that.
Yeah.
That's very
It's
interesting.
toponym. Yeah, it's a toponym.
It hasn't been re-excavated, but there were iron mines there.
Yeah, it was mangan and iron mines, and of course they were the graves. What the archaeologists find it that the excavation was 1991, I think. They just find some graves from the Middle Age, but nothing special.
So on the topic of metalsmithing, you say that blacksmithing and living in non-nomadic settlements is kind of a telltale sign of an Egyptian community. Can you describe a little bit more about the Egyptian affinity to blacksmithing and metalworking?
Yes. Traditionally, for example, my grandfather was a blacksmith, and generally the blacksmith crafts it was one of the pillars of the living existence, professional of these people, of this community. Why is a blacksmith? Probably because, as we mentioned, the reason for colonization was exploitation of the iron. But from other side, we have to be aware that maybe when you're talking about Egyptians, we are not talking about only the ethnic identity from in the ancient time or time of Ramses II. Maybe you can talking about the slaves that were slaved by the pharaohs, and there are different communities with Egyptian identity as how to say citizen identity, not ethnic identity, because the masters of the fire and melting of the metal, they were the Hittites, you know, and probably now it's a superstition, of course. After the Kadesh agreement between the Ramses and the Hittites were also colonizing the Anatolia, the Balkans, and other areas just for melting of the iron and exploiting. So, but the Egyptians from other side, the Egyptians in Egypt, ethnically, let's say, or geographically, they were the masters of the melting of the gold, because you see all those artifacts that we have from Egypt. We will see that they are the very skilled masters and artists of melting of the iron and making so high level it and velvet ornaments with the gold. So probably the melting of the metal was very how to say familiar, or very no one profession of the Egyptian, the Hittites together, and maybe that kind of coalition. So everywhere when we find in the Balkans the Egyptian community, generally they are related with the blacksmith profession in a city or in a villages and so on. And from other side is the, let's say, the main element of the differencing between the Roma and the Egyptians, between the Roma as a wandering nomadic people. It was not possible to every day to installing and reinstalling the old tools that the blacksmiths need, especially the fire and the anvil. So anvil is very hard every day to install it and reinstall it. So and actually the blacksmith is not a characteristic for nomadic or wandering people. And blacksmith profession is characteristic for the sedentary people, and that's it. The main difference. Even that some Roma communities work as not as a blacksmith, but we say under blacksmith, just for horses to make those shoes for horses, something like that. Of course, but they don't need the anvil; they just need a little fire, no, not a big fire.
With Cadmus and Harmonious, in that myth, they both become snakes at the end of the myth. And I found that there's this idea of a snake cult in Kosovo, where every tower house kula has a snake in it somewhere as a protective deity. Do you think that might have anything to do?
In believings of Egyptians, the snake is always the protectors. In the believing of other Balkan people, especially the Slavs people, the snake is always something negative, demons, And also you see the differences. We have some in Ohrid. If you go into the museum, you will find one stone with a snake, and actually it's a cobra, and it's from the Roman period, and it's a cult of the snake. And the cult of the snake is very related with the sedentary communities, because the snake is one who is protecting the house, and the house is always a symbol of the parents, the cult of the
ancestors.
Of the ancestors,
yeah.
That's right, not the ancestors. So yes, but you know, this is not the strike line, because also in some Slavic people we have the cult of the snake. But however, as a cultural value, in the Balkan here, the cult of the snake, I think, is an influence from the Middle East and Egypt.
How were the Balkan Egyptians treated by the Ottomans? I think that in their documents they drew a pretty clear line between gypsies and Kiptians, I think they called them.
Kiptian.
So they recognized them as a distinct people.
During the Ottoman Empire, actually the Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, he brought two different laws. One, it was Kanuname, I don't know on the Turkish now, maybe I have to read somewhere the document.
The Code of the Egyptians of the Vilayet of Rumelia?
Of Rumelia, for Kiptiane, and the second one is for Çingene. Çingene is meaning for the Roma, Tzigans, and Kiptiane is for the Egyptian. Even when we read the canons, there is not, how to say, any special norms about that. It's only the title. And generally they are talking about wandering people inside of the canons. But in Istanbul, if you go in everywhere, in Turkey today, we have a lot of toponyms related with kips, kops. Kips is kops, you know. For example, in Istanbul, opposite to the Hagia Sophia, you have one big Kipti touch from the Theodosius time, actually. But the Theodosia bring those obelisks there. and today the Turkish called them Kiptitash.
That's interesting. I didn't know about that.
Kipti, Copti, because of the Copts. And the Copts, they are the Christians from Egypt that after the 7th century where they live in very different circumstances. Even today in Egypt, we have around 8 million, I think, Copts in Egypt. So, but actually the etymology of the name Copt is mean Egyptian. That's it, from the Arabic language.
The Kiptians in the
Copts,
Balkans, the
okay.
Copts, were they Christian in the Balkans, or?
The Islamization actually in the Balkan was very intensive after the 18th century. And probably when we are talking about previous 16th, 15th century, when actually this canon was brought, we were talking about probably the Christians. But I remember I will mention again that the intensive Islamization it was made in the 18th century after the Piccolominis and Austro-Hungarians make invasion to the Ottoman. And they actually, because during the Ottoman Empire, for the Ottoman was not so important people to make the Muslims, because if the number of the Muslims was going up, they would have the less money in the treasury because of this tax called jizya. Jizya paid all the non-Muslim population. But after this attack of the Austro-Hungarians and Piccolomini to the Balkans, the security was much more had much more priority than money from jizya tax.
So in the 1990s, you wrote that Alexander the Great's real father was probably Nectanebo II, who disguised himself as Ammon. Would that factor into some of the Balkan Egyptians today, their descendants?
In the books Alexandridas, it's wrote that actually the last pharaoh of Egypt before the Persian ruling there was actually Naktebo, or Neftanach we say here, but Naktebo in English. And also you can find everywhere in English sources as a Naktebo. And according to the myths, or from the ancient time, during the time of Alexander, is saying that actually the Philip II was sterile, and it was not possible Olympia, the mother of the Alexander, to become pregnant with the Philip. And after one, before to go in Philip to one battle, he said, if you are not now you sleep, but when I coming back, if you're not pregnant, then we'll make a divorce. And Olympia was crying because it was not possible to become pregnant, but one of the servants of the Olympia said, don't cry, we have here our man, who is a magician, and he will help you. And that was actually one kind of priest as a magician. And he said, okay, don't worry, now Ammon will enter to you, and you will be the mother of a great king, and so on. What is important is that these scripts, Alexandrides wrote it like this, that Nectanebo, the name of the priest who was very skilled with the magics, and actually he was the last king of the Egypt, and he entered it in Olympia as a snake. Again, we have the snake, and the snake was actually Ammon. And after, I don't know, when Alexander was growing up, Olympia, she said to Alexander that actually his real father is not a Philip, but it's Neftanah, but Alexander killed Neftanah or Naktebo, according to these scripts, Alexandridas. But when after the battle of Tyre, and he entered to the Egypt, he wanted to attack the Egypt, but the Egyptian people at that time said, why you are attacking us when you are our son? And actually, as Alexander entered in Egypt as a liberator, not as somebody who conquered them or who gave them the new slavery of the Persians. And actually, when he went to the Siva Oasis temple of Ammon, the priests of the temple of Siva Oasis said to the Alexander that actually he has origin of the Egyptian father, Nephtanach, and after that Alexander accepted to be the descendants of the pharaohs, and he was proclaimed as a pharaoh, and actually all his behavior was changed as an Egyptian pharaoh and so on. And actually his wish, he built first the city of Alexandria, which was the center of the world in that time, with the library, with all the museums and temples and so on. And his wish was actually after his death, he to be born in Alexandria, with actually the Ptolemies. He implemented his wish. Even that today we don't know where actually the grave of Alexander, but according to the scripts, it was born in Alexandria. From Babylon, he was brought to Alexandria.
I've heard a lot of people think it's under the mosque there, or it's some monument.
It was the mosque. But also I saw one new research today that actually from that mosque in Alexandria he was brought to Venice. The sarcophagus of the Alexander from that mosque is actually in London, British Museum in London today.
And you mentioned the cults of Isis worshipped in Bitola and Ohrid.
And with Stobi.
So I'm wondering how long they were worshipped around Ohrid versus Stobi, because they're pretty far separated. It seems like a lot of sites were around the lakes, and then you've got Stobi kind of in the central part of Macedonia. How long do you think that cult was worshipped?
Petar Seljan, the same, this Croatian Egyptologist, he wrote also one book, The Trace of Isis, and he ubiquificated more than 300 temples of Isis in the whole Roman Illyric or the Balkan Peninsula. So from other side, when we mention again the Olympia and her behavior after her night with Nephtanach, she also changed her behavior, and people are saying, Plutarch is saying that actually Olympia started to believe to Isis, and the snake was also very familiar with her. She was living with the snakes also living. Isis was living in a snake, with a snake. The goddess of Isis in some application was together with cobras. And also Cleopatra, when she was suicided, her cult was actually the Isis, and she suicided with cobra, with the snake. What has happened actually? All these temples that were present in the Balkans during this period, ancient period, were destroyed by Octavian August because of Cleopatra. He believed that Cleopatra succeeded 2 times to destroy the Roman Empire, first with Guy Julius Caesarius, second time with Marco Antonio. And actually he believed that the magic of Cleopatra and Isis is very present in the Roman Empire, and he gave the order that in all temples of Isis to be destroyed and the statues of Isis to be cut at the head. And
I've noticed most of them are missing their heads.
Yeah, actually today all the statues of Isis are without head. So it's an Octavian August section. We don't have, exactly the order of Octavian. Probably it was an oral order. But after the Octavian, all the temples of Isis were destroyed. Even if you go in today in Stobi, is the biggest temple today in Macedonia, in the statue, you will see Isis with the big torsos but without head.
I do plan on visiting.
And in Ohrid also the statue of Isis and the temple where was found the temple of Isis is statue without head.
Well, I noticed in the book that you have over there, you have a photo of the Bosnian pyramid, and I'm wondering, did the Balkan Egyptians ever try to replicate smaller pyramids, mounds? I found one mound up in Kosovo they say a Dardanian king might be buried in.
Okay, the phenomenon of pyramids is, I don't know how you're familiar with that.
Not very.
Not
Slightly.
really,
They started with ziggurats.
It was like kind of, aggregate of energy and so on. Something that the energy from the soil, from the earth, is bringing out and also relating. The pyramids are relating the three worlds: underground world, this world, and the world in a sky actually, and the energy is going with a high frequency. There are a lot of books about the phenomenon of pyramid and energy of pyramids. Now, some scholars are saying that actually the influence of the Balkan were transferred to Egypt after the last glaciations. The last glaciation was in 3,000 years before Christ. In that time, actually, north was tropic climate. in south was another lake on Guana and so on. And after the glaciation, people started to move from north to the south. And actually, the knowledge about the pyramids was brought in Egypt from the north. Maybe, I don't know. But we have pyramids not only here, we have pyramids in Mexico, we have pyramids in Japan, under the sea, we have a lot of, however, there are a lot of theories about the pyramids, but for sure, the most known pyramids are those in Egypt, and especially those in Giza. And when we're talking about pyramids, it's a very, very big big
subject.
Unknown things, but probably is.
Zoltan Kiss was a nuclear engineer working at the largest power plant in Hungary, and he was showing me he would ground a pyramid, a big metal pyramid he had in his little yard that he would experiment in. He would ground it, and the temperature inside would drop 15 degrees instantly. Kind of interesting, just on the idea that it represents energy coming from the earth.
Also, if you're going to Bosnia now, in Visoko, did you work there?
I haven't gone.
You have to go. People are saying when they're entering in those corridors inside, and if you live there, you're like in a space with no noise, you feel the energy, but a lot of diseases are medicated there.
That's interesting. I've heard the same for the Egyptian pyramids.
Just people sleeping there 1-2 nights, and after that they are healed. I don't know, maybe. But for example, some stones that were in the kidneys are now in pancreas and so on.
I could use some help
After
with that.
when you're going to Rengen, you don't have any more stones inside.
I think I need to book a trip then.
Yeah,
I've gotten stones recently.
You have to go there.
So what are some highlights from your leadership of the Union of Balkan Egyptians? What was their stated goal, and what did they do for the community?
Okay, our union was much more a union for affirming the identity, protection of the culture and cultural heritage, and promoting the culture and cultural heritage, and protecting of the minority rights. It was created in 1998. In 1999 started the war in Kosovo, and immediately we had a lot of problem with refugees from Kosovo, and we had so many humanitarian crises because Egyptians and Roma and later the Ashkalis were put in one very delicate position. Their houses were burned in Kosovo, and leaders of the Egyptians from Kosovo were evicted. It was a very hard period. Of course, from other side, we succeeded with the Balkan Egyptian this question of minority protections to be internationalized, to make an international discussion international level, let's say better. So we succeed to put the position of the Egyptian in Albania, especially in reports of the State Department for Human Rights. I think almost every year from that time is always mentioning that the discrimination to the Balkan Egyptian in Albania especially is always mentioned in State Department reports, annual report for human rights. That's good, I think. The World Bank was also started to interest in for more projects about social inclusion of the Egyptians. Then in the Council of Europe, especially the framework conventions, Convention for Protection of National Minorities, and the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance, we put all the time to be observed, and this, how to say, awareing of the international community about the existence of the community succeeded maybe first the Egyptian in Kosovo to be put in a constitution and to have reserved seats in the parliament and so on. Then in Albania, the Egyptians were not recognized, for example, before 2005, 2006. In 2017 now, when the new law was brought for minority protection in Albania, the Egyptians are mentioned as a national minority. Then in Serbia, we also created the National Council for Egyptians there. In Montenegro, we're still fighting. In the last report of the framework of the Council of Europe Framework Convention for National Minorities is put it that Montenegro have to devote much more attention to the discrimination and protection of the Egyptian in Montenegro. And we have here also in Macedonia still, we are waiting for the change in the constitution, and Egyptians will be put in a constitution. I hope that this, the next changes that will be with the Bulgarian minority in a proposal of the government, and also the Egyptian to be put it in a constitution. So after the creating of the union, we see in all these countries, actually with the internationalization of the affairs with the Egyptians, we succeeded actually the minority rights politics to grow up in a bigger level. So I think that it was success of the Union of Balkan Egyptian.
So on the topic of the Union, I believe that's a successor group of the Organization of Egyptians in Yugoslavia, Nazmi Arifi?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about the organization and Nazmi Arifi's ideas, what he was like as a person?
Nazmi Arifi is from Struga, and during the Tito's Yugoslavia he was very active in the syndicate movement for the labor rights, actually. And after the first Congress of the Roma in London, 1971 or 72, in Yugoslavia started one politics of the Egyptians to be also put it in a framework of the Roma, and it was started from 1980s. Before, let's say 1980s, the Egyptians, because in Yugoslavia, because of the language, were registered as Albanians, because the Egyptians from Ohrid, Struga, Debar, Resen, they speak Albanian language. Even it's a discussion of why it's an Albanian language. the name of Albanian language. We can discuss later. It's another issue. And in 1970s, a lot of Egyptians, because they wanted to differ from Albania, because in Yugoslavia was one kind of language you speaking at home, what is your mother tongue, so you are belonging to that community. Because the Egyptians from these areas, through Ohrid, Resen and Debar, they are speaking the Tosca dialect, they said, okay, we are Toscarita, like Toscana in Italy, something similar. Tosca, you know? And, but that declaration in the census was not publicly evident. So after the constitution changed in Yugoslavia in 1974, it was given a right to the people to declare themselves like they're feeling. So in the census 1981, it was for the first time the people to declare like Egyptians. And that was the first, struggles of people to Nazmi Arifi, Usni Zemovski, Demir Kamberi, there are some intellectuals from that time, they organized this activism, citizenized activism. But this, evidenting of as an Egyptian was not recognized by the state because it was not a codex, specific codex when they published the results.
Oh, so they published it as other or
others, that's like, or no one or other, or I don't know, or put it somewhere.
I lost the statistics, but you wrote somewhere that something like 13,000 in Macedonia declared themselves Egyptian, or
When?
I think the census
1991,
of
3,300 something.
So it was 3,000 in Macedonia, but I believe 13,000 in Kosovo, perhaps.
Okay, I'm not believing at all the official statistic here. Everywhere it's a manipulation. Maybe it's not manipulation, but nobody is observing the process. Because we are observing, for example, the elections from the beginning of the process, from the candidation until to the publishing of the results. But no one is observing the process of registration. But if you're now comparing, for example, Ohrid, we have these membership cards of Egyptians for 4,000, only for Ohrid, and they are publishing the results of 1,500 Egyptians. Or the World Bank is saying that in Albania they gave aid to 300,000 Egyptians. Okay, they are saying that in Albania living 7,000 Egyptians.
Nazmi Arifi believed there were 1 million plus Egyptians.
We said in the first Congress of the Balkan Egyptians that in the Balkans generally are around 1 million. Because of Albania, we said it's around 300,000 to 400,000. In Kosovo, we have around 100,000. In Macedonia, it's around 30,000, 25 to 30,000. Ethnographically, I know every village in Macedonia. But the biggest number of Egyptians are in Greece. Even today. But in Greece, you know very well, they don't recognize the rights of the people to identify themselves differently than the member of the Greek nation. They recognize only religion identity, Muslims or Christians or Catholic. And when you say Christian here, they're saying about Orthodox and Catholics and so on. But generally, if you go into, for example, in Peloponnesia, in Nafli or in Methonia, I was in those cities. Also here in Thessaloniki, Florina, Edessa, there are a lot of big communities, like in Korča, for example, in Albania. So, statistic is politics. Statistic is not the real number. For example, if we see also the figures of the ethnographers from the 19th century or beginning of 20th century, you will see that the number of Egyptians, according to their describing of which community, is around 1 million in the Balkan Peninsula. In Bulgaria also we have Egyptians, in the Rhodope, south of Bulgaria, Rhodope mountain. I was there in those city of Madan, in the Rhodope mountain, so. But they are declaring like a Turks there, because of the Muslim religion. And so also if you go into Strumica here in Macedonia, in some villages, you will see people are from this community, they're declaring as a Turks because of the religion, they are much more safe to say that, but the Turkish community never accepted them to be part of the Turkish community. For them they are Kiptians, captive, and so on.
What was it like working with him? He was with the Union of Balkan Egyptians, right?
He was the vice president, yes. He was the symbol of discrimination and how the state is making pressure. First he was evicted from his house. Actually it was not his house, it was social welfare solidarity house in Tirana. But because he started to work for the Causa, he was evicted by the mayor of Tirana, and that time was Edi Rama. Today he's a prime minister. And he protested a lot of times. Then he was pushed in a prison because of disturbing the surrounding, so the environment. After that, when Berisha came to the power, he became the director of the school in Tirana because he was a teacher, artist teacher.
He was a surgeon too, wasn't he?
Yeah. And again in 2050, 60, he was in a prison and denied on 12 years in prison because of any construction of the case for stealing the money or making bribery, something, I don't know what. But after 3-4 years, he was released. And now he's working against the Egyptians, probably because they make the pressure in the prison. And he's saying that actually the Egyptians are the part of the Albanian nation and so on. And that's it, for example, one example of how the state is making the pressure to the people.
Well, I found the quote, the article Dusko Doder, who wrote in Macedonia, he said, Nazmi Arifi said, the Albanians hated us and accused us of pretending to be Albanian. I'm just wondering if relations with Albania have improved, if there's a lot more recognition of the Egyptians there.
You know, the construction of the Albanian nation is totally different than the construction of the nations, other nations in the Balkans. And the construction, the pillar of the Albanian national identity is the language. And they are different to, for example, the Bulgarians, Greeks, Serbians, and so on. The pillar is not only the language, also is the religion. But in Albanians, they are not making a difference in religion, but the unifying component is language. Even about the language we can discuss a little bit. And because the Egyptians in Albania are speaking the same language as the Albanians, they are considered to be the part of the Albanian nation. But in everyday life, they are always ghettoized socially. They are not in the same circles. They are not intermarriages. They are always different. They are always Evjit, Majup, Jup. So they are always in everyday life discriminated, Jup, Evjit, Majup. But officially they are Albanians. That's it. That's it. Actually, the fight. And because of the Kosovo problem, and also here in Macedonia, the Albanians in Kosovo, they use also the Egyptians and Ashkali, because they are speaking the Albanian language, as a part of the Albanian community. This, how to say, identification of the identity was undertaken as an act against the Albanians and pro-Milosevic. We have some Albanian scholars here saying, even Ismail Kadare is saying that you are pro-Milosevic, you are pro-Serb, and so on.
Yeah,
You are Serb spies.
I've seen some early NATO OSCE documents. They say that the Egyptian and Ashkali identities were created by Milosevic.
Yeah, I know. But how to say, it's a very political, corrupted political scholars or journalists. I always say to these scholars, how is possible that Milosevic to create in Albania 300,000 or 400,000 Egyptians? If he created in Kosovo, how is possible in Albania to create Milosevic? You understand? So it's not the problem of the creating, of constructing of Milosevic.
Well, I have been very curious about the Egyptians in Albania and in Kosovo especially. There was Karim Abazi.
Yes.
He was a representative of the Egyptians at the peace conference for Kosovo.
In Rambuya, yeah.
I'm wondering what he did. And did they view him as an agent of Milosevic?
Yes. First, the Egyptians were not included in these negotiations for a solution of the Kosovo when the Serbian government, when still Kosovo was under the, say, Serbian authority. In this negotiation, the Egyptians were not included. And actually, the Association of Egyptians from Kosovo asked to be part of the negotiation. And this, I think, Markovic, he was the chair of the negotiation team. Actually, he included the Egyptian on the request of the Egyptian, not because of the construction of the Serbs. And when he went to Rambouillet, we have his declarations in the media, because there were not a direct negotiation. It was with a mediator, and sometimes these members of the negotiation team from the Serbian government or the Serbian part, let's say, they made some press conferences in France, in Rambouillet. Karim Abazi, when he made the declaration in the media, he said, we are Egyptians and we are living in Kosovo too. The world have to be aware that in Kosovo are living Egyptians. And he said Kosovo is not Albanians, Kosovo is not the Serbians, Kosovo is of the Kosovo citizens.
Did they feel frustrated at all that NATO and OSCE were looking at them just as though they were Serbs?
He was. He died as well. And because of all of this, how to say, circumstances, he was considered from the Albanians as a spy or anti-Albanian. But he in any declaration he didn't say nothing against Albanians or against Serbia. He just protected the identity of Egyptian.
So you said he died?
He died, yeah. He died 2017 or 1980.
Oh, so a natural.
But his house was fired. His village where the Egyptians lived were totally fired. I have some pictures. So very stupid things for making terror against Albanians and so on. It was very dirty politics. And we always had the position, okay, if you have any individual who killed the civilians, accuse the individual, not the collective. It's not possible to have collective blame.
Do you know what village Abazi? Obilic?
Yes. Subotic and Obilic.
Do you know of any other incidents of violence and discrimination? I've read that 4 Ashkali were killed.
But what we have now, we have that your question, I don't know any victim of Ashkalis from the Kosovo war or Albanian, let's say, military forces who were evicted the Ashkenazi so on. We have Egyptian evicted, but Ashkenazi no. Even we had some refugees from Ashkenazi community here, but no any victims, as we say, murdered and
It was saying it was the early 2000s, if I remember right, 2001 or 2, and they were returning with Serbs to the village. It was around a lake, I think in southern Kosovo, and it wasn't a targeted assassination or anything. It was just people were upset that they were returning to their community, and 4 were killed. And that's one of the few times I've seen in OSCE paperwork. In K4, they made an announcement. They were saying that they condemn the murder of the 4 Ashkali.
maybe, but for me, I didn't saw any how to say artifact, because we are scholars. We are looking for artifacts, not only declarations, but artifacts. As you see, we have artifacts for the victims of Egyptian, but the victims of the Ashkenazi, I don't know. We had some refugees, but to becoming refugees, maybe you have very different motivations to go to be the refugee and asylum, because the most of them actually later were the asylum seekers in the third countries. But however, what is also the problem with Ashkenazi, because up to now, so how many? Almost 2 decades, almost 2.5 decades. I didn't saw any serious scholar article or a book about the ethnogenesis, about the history, about the, how to say, archaeology or something about Ashkali community and identity.
You wrote a brief one about their ties to, I think you said that a common Persian name was Ashkal.
Yes, I know, but they are in a frame of the researching of the population generally, and there are much more legends about the Persian king Hashkan. But where is the relation between Hashkan and Balkans and Kosovo? You have to make the relation with historical proofs, with archaeological proofs, and so on. One of the theses is also that they are coming from Eshkalon. Eshkalon is in Palestine, here in Israel, very close to Egypt. But again, we don't have historical sources. We don't have any archaeological proof about that.
Dr. Gezim Visoka argues that NATO ignores the distinction, or often sort of glosses over the distinction between Roma, Ashkali, and Egyptians, trying to avoid inter-ethnic conflict. Should the RAI category be done away with? Should they recognize each of the 3 individually?
In the Constitution, they recognize, so they are separate. The international community, actually not NATO, but UNIC administration started to use this acronym RIA, Roma, Ashkali, and Egyptian, which is for me racistic stereotypizing of 3 communities. So if in the Constitution we have 3 different communities, not only in Constitution, but in reality, we have to respect the identity of each community. So of every person and every community. So I don't know why we should put all this together.
Well, what do you make of his assertion that there are bad actors within those communities sowing division and profiting for themselves and not really building the community?
Okay, because it's a problem of the social inclusion strategies, and for the state it's much more easy if he made a strategy for the 3 groups. But the inclusion is not only economical issue, it's also the cultural issue. So when we come into the culture, then we have problems with inclusion of these 3 communities. And generally we have majorization from the international community and the influence of the Roma international community, and they are always trying to make such political majorization. But when we're talking about identities and communities, we have to respect again all the differences, not to make majorization, because the most important thing for the one community is the culture. Of course, its economy and other state and social services are important, but also the culture and education is very important. So the language, when it comes to culture and the language is another pillar of differences. Roma are trying, which they're totally legal and they have right to make education in Romani language. But the Egyptian and Ashkali, they are not speaking Roma language. They don't know the Roma language. And for that reason, they have a different approach to this strategy. So there is a problem with social inclusion strategies. Ashkali, actually now when we're talking about the Ashkali identity, they were not present in Rabuye negotiations. And because the Albanians accepted this participation of Egyptian in the negotiations as anti-Albanian act, they started to make politics of dividing the community. And for that reason they affirming the one local ethnonym is ethnographic name for one community, to be affirmed as a special community. And for that reason, Egyptian from Ferizaj, from Gnjilane, from Pristina, and other areas there, were organized by some, with the logistic, by some Albanian intellectuals and politicians. They started to take as new community, Ashkali, different from Egyptians, different from Roma. They were always different from Roma, but different from the Egyptians was for the first time. Of course, it was their right.
And you mentioned stereotypes. You've written a lot about stereotypes against Egyptians. When you were a member of parliament, did you find yourself often stereotyped against? Were you, like, what are your personal experience with some of the Egyptian stereotypes?
Okay, I was and I'm still the leader of one political party which is multicultural, not only the Egyptian, but so many small communities in the Balkans, like we have the Croats, we have Torbeši community, we have Montenegrians, Egyptians of course, and others who are not represented in the constitution of the Macedonian, of the constitution of North Macedonia. And our political party is actually collecting all these communities. And when I was the member of parliament, I was caring not only for Egyptian but for all communities. And also, when I was before to be the member of parliament, I was the advisor of the Prime Minister Zoran Zaev, and we work on one strategy for social cohesion, inclusion for all citizens, not only for Egyptians. So when I acting politically, I'm acting as a citizen. I'm not acting as an ethnic Egyptian. Yeah. When talking about ethnic Egyptian, we're talking much more in a non-governmental organization. Human rights, defending minority rights, culture, history, science, and so on. But in the politics, I'm citizen of the state.
That's very interesting to hear that you're more multicultural than just advocating for a specific community.
Thank you.
And you mentioned the Torbash. Are those those are the Macedonian-speaking Muslims, I believe?
Yes, that was the paradigm during the Tito's Yugoslavia. Actually, when Tito's Yugoslavia was created, it was always a problem with the Bosnian community. During the Tito's time in Constitution 74, it was recognized the sixth nation, Muslims with capital M. Not Muslims with a small type. It was a religion identity. But with capital M, it was a nation. And later they become the Bosnians, actually. And in that time, actually, to make in Macedonia, to make a how to say, to stop the influence of the Bosnians Muslim here, in Macedonian authorities created a new, let's say, ethnonym or cultural name, Macedonian Muslims or Muslim Macedonians. It was official politic, but in the field, it was never accepted in a majority. Now, of course, some were accepted, but with the explanation that this is the part of the Macedonian nation or people that during the Ottoman Empire they were Islamized. I'm not agree with that theory because this community antagonism between the Christians and this kind of population and history is from the 10th century with the Bogomilism and movement of Bogomilism here, and in Bosnia with the so-called Paterinism.
I would love to.
Paterens, yeah.
I'd love to see more about the Bogomils. I was planning on coming back because they've got it fascinating.
And these people during the Byzantine Empire were, and not all these Middle Ages, medieval states were totally executed, genocided, isolated, excluded, killed, and for that reason they moved to the mountains. And today, Torbeshi community are living generally in the mountains. When the Ottomans came, Islamic religion was very close to the Bogomilian philosophy, and they accepted the Islam, not because of the, as I said previously, of the assimilation that was made after the Austro-Hungarian invasion, but because of the similarity between the Bogomism theory and the Islam religion. And they are totally different communities. They don't have the same culture. They have the same language, but not the same culture, not the same habits, not the same behavior, and so on. No intermarriages. So totally different communities. Even they have the same language, they have other vocabulary, in some terms that are not existing in between the Macedonian Christians and so on. And for that reason, I'm saying that actually, when it was created the Macedonian nation in the 19th or 20th century, they were not part of that process, And it's not that they are separated from the Macedonian; they're separated from the tribes, maybe in the medieval age, and the majority of these people are not feeling that they are Muslim Macedonians, like Bosnians in Bosnia. They're not feeling that they are Serb, Mohammedan Serbs, or Croatians. So they're feeling a separate community, and I'm respecting their rights to be particular community. Even the majority of Macedonians, they don't want to recognize this politics. This community is a particular.
So you mentioned that your grandfather was a blacksmith, and I'm wondering kind of what your experience was growing up as an Egyptian when you first came to embrace that identity and just what it was like growing up.
Okay, I was a very small boy, and I was born 1970, and Industrial Revolution was so the blacksmith profession was not so, how to say, very existing profession. So my grandfather, he was a blacksmith during, for example, before the Second World War and during the Second World War, and after that until 1960s. But when 1960s started the industrialization, the blacksmith profession was abounded. And I do not remember very well when I remember him when he worked, but I don't remember that he also had other professions. As a farmer, agricultural farmer, he worked also, and Also, it's very important profession for Egyptian, especially in Debar. There is a family Mayovci, that were, for example, we have one documentary made it in 70s, saying the who was also the musician, blacksmith and musician. And in the documentary, they're saying 6 days they are hitting the, how you call
The anvil?
the anvil, and the 7 days they're hitting the drum.
What would you say the state is of the Egyptian national consciousness in the Balkans today? How many people really embrace that identity?
Good question. I think that only the minority of the people with Egyptian origins have the national consciousness that belonging to the Egyptian community. Because of the educational system. In educational system in the Balkan states, you don't have any information about the history of Egyptian and the existence of the Balkan Egyptian community. Generally, not only for Egyptians, generally for all minorities, we have very restrictive information about minorities educational system. Even for those who are in a very well established or recognized. So we still have nation states here, but nation states with primordialistic approach, not nation states as with the citizen approach. And the primordialistic means that the main ethnic group has a right to become the nation and all the others have to be assimilated. And actually the education system and media are not affirming so much the diversity, or they have some, for example, so-called minority channel, but again we have ethnocentristic approach. For example, only Turkish community, they have some emission programs on Turkish language, and that's it. So the Macedonians or the Albanians, they're not understanding what these Turkish people wanted to say in the program, or Albanian or Vlach language. So it's very ethnocentristic parallel worlds, you know.
Which I guess
It's
is
not,
why...
it's not interculturalism, you know. It's okay, you the Turks, okay, you have your program, your media, speak there, and don't so much mess in in the majority politics. And actually, unfortunately, that's it, the reality in the Balkan. And for that reason, the small minorities, they have ambivalent feelings to be the member of the minority communities, because he can be engineer, he can be, I don't know, the writer, scholar, and so on. I'm the only, or the few examples that I succeeded to be the doctor with my identity, to be the member. Even my path was very difficult to keep the identity and to become the scholar and so on, or to be the lawyer and so on. So we have again some professions are reserved for some communities. Bankers, for example, are only Macedonians here in Vlach. Very few of, I think, the bankers, those the main persons, not the official bank officers. So, or the industrials, the people who have the factories here, they are Macedonians. In Serbia, they are Serbs, and so on. It's very few example of, I don't know, industrials or the elite that are from other communities. For that reason, states are affirming this primordialistic approach of the nation.
Which I guess is why it's good that you're embracing the multicultural part rather than the nation-state approach, as you said.